Hello and greetings from warm, sunny Munich. My name is Jürgen Pruss. I'm the CTO, local government at Dell Technologies, and I'm covering local government like cities, utilities, local service providers who are responsible for services around any kind of city environments. Today, I'm with a colleague, a partner of mine, Wolf Stinnes from NTT Group. So we have a joint presentation and a showcase session to show you smart cities with smart solutions. So a holistic end-to-end solution, digital cities, accelerator architecture. So what you have heard in the roundtable before, we show you in a practical and in an architectural view. So, Wolf.
Thank you, Jürgen. Yes, and good afternoon. And for those in Europe, good morning for those further afield, and good evening, possibly even. Very excited to be here today and tell you the story of what started 3 years ago and bring some international flavor on some of the implementations I've done specifically on where we believe digital and sustainable come together in the changing urban mobility. So I'll let Jürgen start, and then I'll follow on in a few minutes and showcase what we've done.
Thank you, Wolf. So please join forces because we are in before the lunch break. To start first with a view of a city, we have a look to a modern city and the many fields of actions within a city. So first, a look about many areas in a city, many datas and many endpoints. When you go through the left to the right, you see different kind of areas, responsibilities, functions, services around a city. Different kind of city departments are working on using data, producing data, and so on. I will not go through each kind of area, only to show how many endpoints and many interfaces are interweaved within a city environment. We will zoom in now into the city to then go to our central city platform architecture. When we go into a little bit more segment view of a city, and to present and show the data flow and the data interoperability in a city context, then you see how we want to see a central city platform interact with the different kind of areas of a city. For example, in the middle up here, the city administration and operational bodies interacting with us, the citizens and the business and the industries and companies, supporting them in different kind of areas and functionalities. Then external providers on the left are interacting with the city. And maybe you have heard in the discussions about smart cities or in the Innovation Hub and the smart city IoT solution on the lower middle side, the smart things are interacting with the city platform. And on the right side, all the external properties like hospitals, police, schools, museums, swimming pools, even golf courts, and so on, are interacting with the city administration, city utilities, and so on. So this is a high-level view about how many data in different kind of areas are flowing through the city. Now we go to an architecture view. So the layers, so to present then later our solution. When we start at the edge, we have different kind of sensors, different kind of data pools, different kind of data areas, even social media or weather data or satellite data, what else are needed for new modern services within the city, for the city themselves, or for us as citizens using applications to interact each other or using services for transportation or what else. Within the presentation layer, we need different kind of solutions to use the applications, to view any kind of data, even is it a web view, it's our smartphone, tablet, is it an open data platform view, or within a city, for example, in the emergency room or police firefighter control room, video walls, and so on. Now, for you who are interested in the different kind of business layer, framework layer, and integration layer, here a couple of buzzwords about the different kind of functions, services used in applications, databases, machine learning, and so on within the different kind of layers to get a structure in the architecture to show you, oh wow, these are a lot of different services and functions to have an eye on it and to plan. When you plan a service, you need to know these kind of requirements of an IoT solution, data integration, API integration, reporting line, and so on. And on the lower side, okay, this is a comfort zone of Dell Technologies, the infrastructure layer, the compute storage. Even when you do artificial intelligence, machine learning, you need GPU-based server for the analytics, visualization, virtualization, and so on. And on the right side, I want to show you with who can you get in contact when you need a solution in any kind of these layers. When you need an edge solution or with a solution in the presentation layer, you can go to Dell, VMware, Dell EMC. When you need within the business framework and integration layer, for example, you need to create and optimize an application, or you need to digitize your processes, then you can go to VMware Tanzu or talk with Boomi to get a process-centric solution to get from analog processes within your business to a digital process-oriented business. And on the lower side, the infrastructure layer with VMware and Dell EMC. May you use already a Dell EMC infrastructure in your data center, then you know our high-level big portfolio in that. To show you some products and solutions here, I will go through all the layers. You see some products, but I want to focus you on the middle because we have a three-phase strategy to start a discussion with you as a customer or as a partner integrator to start from. Where do you want to start from, or where do you need to start from? And in the middle layer, in the three middle layer, you see partial architecture and functions and applications from Boomi for the process-centric solution, and VMware Tanzu for an application-based solution framework when you need to develop applications, when you need to manage administration and to monitor administrations. When applications are rolled out, for example, from now to tomorrow, 1,000, 100,000 users are using the application, you need the underlying infrastructure. You need to perform. It's not good to see an error, oh, this service is not available. So this would not be happened when you use VMware Tanzu technology for that. So this middle layer can be replaced with any other software application solution you need depending on your requirement and use case you want to implement. But the upper layer and the lower layer will at any time the same. So our application down and process-centric and infrastructure up strategy is shown here to sensor you with the discussion we can start with you. So at depending on the way we go, when we know your requirements, we know your strategy and the kind of project, then we can go to the application side, the process side, or the infrastructure side. All together is combined in our Dell Technology private cloud. So a platform that combines all requirements and strength to support you in any kind of area of your digital journey. That means at the end that our private cloud platform is one solution that you as a city provider host the data. The data is in your hand. And depending on, is it personalized data, IoT data, at some situation, data will come together. Sensitive data with some mobility data, IoT sensor data. So this is a solution that can hold any kind of workloads. You see it in the upper left side, virtual desktop infrastructure, artificial intelligence, applications and databases on one single platform in a safe and a in a way that you can scale up at any time, start small, and then you can grow big depending on the journey of your solution. We at Dell Technologies bring you an end-to-end strategy and also solutions that we start at the business level with the business strategy to discuss with C-level, on the C-level, the strategy of your city, and then go to the next steps to prioritize the journey of your digitalization. We know about the verticals. We are in the commercial government, education, healthcare, industry, manufacturing, automotive. We have the expertise and know how we have to fulfill the requirements in this different kind of verticals. So we have the architecture, the solutions, and the products in one all hand. So not one size fits all, but we have in one company all the solutions you need. That means when we start at the client level, at the user level, the IoT, the things level, and go to the application level, you see the brands popping up, that all family members of Dell Technologies can support and deliver and deploy solutions independently, depending on the requirements in each layer. You see, even in the financial business, we are conform. So we can talk with you about the recovery programs, depending of education, digitalization. For example, here in Germany, the online access, OZG, for digitalization of the applications. We know about the recovery programs. We support you finding the right programs, combining the programs, and support you about all the organizing the full fulfillment of recovery programs. And now I want to hand over to Wolf to present you a very nice solution we have developed together to present you a showcase.
Thank you, Jürgen, and a warm welcome to my part of the presentation again. So my role is a Principal Director for Smart Cities in the NTT Group. And I'm going to share with you the context of how we interpret our role in the discussion around sustainable and smart cities, but then also take it to the very real examples that I want to dive in with you. Just a few words around NTT. There's some facts and figures up here. A global company that incorporates a number of brands. Importantly, I think the points that I want to highlight here is a huge R&D investment that's spread around the globe, much of it in Japan itself, but also in California and increasingly also in Europe. So we bring all of those together. I've picked a slide here that is highly topical. I think in the pandemic being eased in many parts of the world, fortunately, including Europe, we play a pivotal part in bringing the fans back to either the venues themselves or then bring the fan experience out there. So IndyCar is one that just 2 weeks ago we did both. We actually allowed our solutions to bring the fans back safely to the venue itself in a controlled and governed fashion, but also closer to home in Europe here, perhaps. We are servicing the 11 cities in Amsterdam itself and the Euros that have just commenced, and wishing all the European fans here well for their particular teams, and obviously also the other showcase where we make use of our predictive and AI capabilities is, of course, the Tour de France that's also about to kick off. While those are kind of more the business figures, I always bring it close to home to say without NTT, no Netflix or no YouTube, because across the oceans and through our global data center infrastructure, over 40% of the traffic flows that covers the internet. And then why that is important in terms of the earlier discussions we had today is because that gives us the capability to be a leading cybersecurity provider. So a very early view on all the threats that are out there. As an organization, why the urban fabric? Well, because I think of the globalization being continuing around the world, the new megacities coming into fruition, but also because we believe the most impact in terms of the ubiquitous use of technology and digitization that goes with that has the biggest impact on sustainability in the urban fabric and the urban landscape. And we we encapsulate that in the vision that was formulated by our then new CEO, Sawada-san, to say we have both the opportunity but also the obligation to bring our technology together, not only what we do today, but also what we're developing for tomorrow. At a very personal and individual scale, if we look at the human scale, I think maybe what's known to most in the audience is the work done on the digital twin of the human body. So specifically in times like these, when I think we start understanding the value of being able to simulate our very individual and very personal effect that potential medical treatments will have on us, vaccination as an example. Going up all the way to simulations that working with satellite companies, both the Japanese and other space authorities to, as Christina Martinez put it, I think was very nice to say, the eyes, the ears and the nose of the city, of the urban fabric, of the landscape. So we cover that entire layer. When we think around the digital twin, I think for us it really starts with data. And if we interpret that more closely in terms of our obligation and our participation within the sustainability agenda, NTT is the business avenger for the United Nations SDG 11. We do a lot of work in other areas as well, life on land, life in the oceans, but specifically for SDG 11, the sustainable cities, we believe that we've got a role to play. And I think what other speakers and Jürgen have alluded to is that the combination of data, so that horizontal capability to bring data together so that you can track where you are, you can make improvements, you've got the data to make the right decisions. On the one hand, but also that ubiquitous connectivity that speaks to bridging the digital divide. I think Michael mentioned that from a Barcelona perspective. We consider ourselves as a provider of what we would call the utility of data. So both for the interaction of cars, like Sander indicated, make sure that time-is edge compute can happen, but also all the way to bring equality of connectivity to people. And then we've got some very direct impact in terms of the energy consumption. So making our own data centers that we provide to customers directly run on renewable energy, or even those that we provide to the hyperscalers, specifically in the European context, where we're going to a net zero 2030 journey there in terms of our provision, but also in terms of the actual compute, so quantum computing, optical networking. So bringing down the soaring environmental cost of the data consumption that goes hand in hand with an increase in digitization. In terms of making that digital twin capability a reality, we partnered with one of our global partners, Microsoft specifically, in over a year ago, and really driving that into the entire scale of it. So whether that's at a city level, a personal level, as I indicated, and making that a reality across our company organizations. And then obviously we have the geospatial aspect to that. So there we're making investments, and I would say the best kept secret next to Google Maps in terms of hair technologies based here in Europe that provide many of the OEMs in terms of smart cars around the location services, but also increasingly the public transport elements. And then we, together with Toyota, we're actually building such a new city. We call it the Woven City. So how does new ways of work, and we thinking around remote work here. So designing a city specifically back to the human scale, taking away fossil-fueled mobility entirely. And that's being built between Tokyo City and on the foothills of Mount Fuji at the moment. And then we're doing a lot of research, and you'll see this publicly in the first global organization that we've inviting and have participation of many of the technology players to bring this optical network, this ubiquitous layer of connectivity into play. And then finally, what I want to talk about is, okay, so now that we've collecting that data, what do we do with it? And I want to share some examples of how we went about that. In the main, our customers in this regard are city operators or to some extent public transport providers increasingly that understand the capability just for their own operations. So I think we had an earlier example of working with citizens or working for citizens. I think in the main, we find that the first uptake or the first step is working for citizens in a better way, and that brings the citizens on board and the participation that was highlighted as being so crucial for the success of these kind of projects going forward. I think Theo was very adamant about not just creating a data lake for the sake of data's purpose, and we've certainly found that in our journey that if you do need to ask the right question, and you've got to get your insights very pertinent to what you want to achieve if you want to create sustainable digitization projects. And so we certainly work with our customers and have found success in doing so with saying what is sometimes it starts with a real-time view, but more importantly, what are the insights that we can generate? And what predictions can we make out of that enhance the safety of our citizens, that enhance our own operations, enhance the quality of life, both in the very near term, so what happens on my metro in the next hour, in the next 24 hours, to looking at cyclical events over a period of a year. And then being very specific in terms of what data do we need to achieve that. Now, in some cases, we see that is a proliferation of sensors or new sensors on the edge. It often is, and I think we've alluded to that, is understanding what data sources are out there. Again, I think the London example was great in terms of understanding maybe device location, maybe the state of devices, and with permission, of course, also the sensors on those devices. But in the main, we find that up to 80% of the data that we require to generate these new insights are actually already residing somewhere in the city for operational systems that are active in a particular function. So that, I think, is probably the single biggest learning that we've taken from that, is that historically systems over 10, 20 years have grown quite efficient and effective, but for a very specific purpose. But unlocking those and opening those silos rather than breaking those silos, I think, is the key to success in that regard. Certainly what we found. And maybe just bringing the context to where we started together with Dell in the journey was the trigger event in Las Vegas a few years ago. So mainly around public safety is where we started, understanding how people moved, what they were doing, were there any issues with that, growing that into the traffic side of it, because that gives us predictive insights in where people will be, how they move around the city. But then also expanding that into the public transport side of it, and then applying that to other scenarios and places as well. So whether that is returning safely to work in the bottom right in terms of buildings, whether that is actually just, I think, enhancing the quality of life and then just feeling to be coming positively out of a pandemic in terms of specifically events, then is what we're expanding to and have expanded and are continuing to do so. To give you a feeling, in addition to what Jürgen was saying, I'm just very quickly going to touch on this logical architecture here, so very much what Jürgen shared. Just again highlighting this the capability, the necessity of what we call the edge compute or the edge processing units. So both in terms of the massive volumes of data that can be incoming at the edge, but also, and equally importantly, the capability to anonymize data and really just take any privacy concerns out right at the edge. So in Europe particularly, that might mean that, or does mean in many cases, that the video, for instance, is analyzed but not even stored locally, but purely the data stream, the metadata that comes out of that is placed into the customer core. And equally, we heard this a few times, the adherence to policy of a particular city or the EU at large is largely dependent on where that data is and understanding what we call the canonical data or metadata around that. So whose data is it? What is allowed to be done with it? What is the age sensitivity of that data, and just encapsulating all those policies within what we call our customer core, very specific to the needs of that particular customer. But then we do have the global core that makes sure that all the components are running smoothly. And to some of the questions that I saw in the chat there in terms of the data interoperability being very specific to work with data standards, but also encapsulate those in what we call the common data objects. So to understand what a data point is at the right at the edge and how it translates through that policy right to the core and the customer core and generating those insights. A quick feel for where we've done this. So as we mentioned, we started right in the west here in the city of Las Vegas. We've got our first implementations in Europe at the moment. We're deploying in Brussels, or we have deployed in Brussels. We've got a client innovation center, so the invitation is open to come and have a look and work with us there around specific innovations around cities. But also now coming close to you, Jürgen, you know that we've deploying the customer core for demonstration purposes in our innovation center that we have in Munich as well. Taking you just very quickly through two of the case studies and then the demo. The first year in Las Vegas saw the success that we articulated with the city directly in terms of what the very tangible and explicit benefits would be, all the way down to monetary terms, so that we, when we do deploy pilots, we give ourselves some time to validate those. You can see the dollars saved there with, I would say, fairly small installations, so less than 50 sensors in the innovation center in the city of Vegas in the first year, but achieving what we set out to achieve. So both in terms of the accuracy of the predictions on the right there. Secondly, the processing on the edge. So you can see 150 terabytes of data flowing through the edge. Very, very small fraction of that actually becoming or being turned into metadata that is relevant to the insights that and predictions that we present to the client. And maybe lastly, one of the key things that we have found in terms of the quality of life studies in cities in the recent years is the use of green spaces. How that has increased, how the knowledge that they are safe have contributed to their use, and how that it impacts the quality of life, as I mentioned. Then the one that I want to actually go into a demonstration is right on the other end of the world. So that is going from people movement and traffic in terms of cars, and trucks, etc., to public transport. And it's really topical in how I think we've heard a few times how the pandemic drove digitization generally. So most of us feel that, I guess, in the workplace, and us having a virtual conference here is a key example of that. But for public transport authority, I mean, the lockdown, I'm going to say, spells disaster in the sense that as you come out of a lockdown, how do you make sure that people are comfortable making use of public transport? How do you show to them? How do you build that trust that you actually got a handle in terms of how full the stations, the platforms, and the services and the vehicles are that you make use of? And how do you communicate that? So those were really the key challenges that the public transport in Victoria posed to us, and asked us equally pertinently, how quickly can you deploy from the idea that or the need being established to having an MVP that serves that purpose. And I think with the help of our partners and having pre-built some of those solutions in other instances helped us to do this really quickly. So within 12 weeks, we could deliver that capability, I'm going to say, in time for lockdown being eased and people coming back. So let me quickly jump across to that. I'm hoping that yep. So we are, 1 second. We spoke too long, so the session. Oh.
So in the meantime, we can answer one question. There was a question, how can smart city project solution are replicated from one city to another, and what are some of the challenges that need to be overcome? So as you've seen in my presentation, our main architecture center will be a hyperconverged infrastructure, fully integrated and validated infrastructure based on compute, storage, network, virtualization, and management. So this blueprint and this architecture is the base infrastructure to support all the other databases, IoT, smart city solutions in one way. And this will be replicated to the different kind of use cases within the cities. In Germany, we have several cities using a hyperconverged infrastructure as a center infrastructure to use for the applications of the administration, but also for utility data, energy management data, or other small smart city solutions. And they start small. It's a small cluster, you can name it, a hyperconverged system. And depending on the growth, they can independently and uninterruptedly expand these cluster environments. If they need more compute or they need more storage, then you grow depending on your requirements. And together with partners like Entity, we have the software solution in place to support the different kind of mobility, smart city, wastewater, any kind of use case to a central platform.
Good, thank you, Jürgen. And we're back. And maybe just to add to some more flavor to that question is, I think the pilot approach that Jürgen mentioned is key, but also that this is a productized software. So those use cases that I showed you there, that overview, and indeed the one that I'm demoing now, are software-based modular deployment capabilities. So you can pick any of the use cases, you can pick a combination of those use cases. Having a partner like Dell providing edge infrastructure, and we needed customer core infrastructure in a pre-set up way, allows us to achieve those quick wins and those speeds that we spoke about. So going into a pilot in weeks rather than months. So just to come back to that point. So what I've now got back on the screen and refreshed and logged in is the overview map of the 220 stations in the larger Melbourne. I haven't changed my time frame, so they're about 8 hours ahead. So it's sitting just past 9 there on a Tuesday evening. So things are getting pretty quiet. Obviously, we can jump around in this map. We can jump to specific stations. I've chosen Melbourne Central here. Other interesting stations are, particularly as those in public transport will know, where there's interchanges. Richmond maybe, so we can jump to that. And this is the current view in Melbourne. I think one interesting point here would be to say, and that's maybe just, sorry, that is the percentage of the capacity. So blue is very, very empty, green is quite empty, but also understanding that in different lockdown levels, there's a limit on the capacity of those transit and platforms and stations. So here we're talking about 100% capacity, but we also, as part of this, in terms of the pandemic response, also in the uncertainty of the day, roughly a year ago, is the ability to adjust that capacity according to lockdown levels. So that could be on a lockdown level 1 in Melbourne, that would equate to 25%. And then the alerts and what you see here would adjust accordingly. So an interesting journey back in time could be into December, for instance, where the picture looks very different. So this was lockdown 1, people coming back to Christmas shopping. And you can see that some of those stations are hitting the alert in terms of the overcapacity based on that lockdown level at the time. At the same time, we can jump back to live. We can see for any particular station, we can drill into expected occupancy for the next hour, based on my local timer, of course. And then go also jump into any specific service. So that's the operator view, and this being able then to react or predict and prevent any particular issue, either by over time changing carriages in terms of how many are on a particular service, or making changes physical with potential barriers even at stations in the city centre to address that. Then coming to the analytics side of it, in terms of drilling down, making use of that data in a particular purpose. I think the key, as the dashboard comes up, you'll see the key thing is around understanding what the patterns look like. Maybe on the bottom right here, just very, very quiet as it goes into nighttime. But this is looking at in the next hour, which are the 5 stations that will see the highest occupancy. Very quiet now. But we can also then look at the pattern. This here is Flinders Street, which is one of the interconnecting ones close to town. When we go back to including Melbourne Central Station here, and maybe an interconnecting one like Footscray, we can see that data here. We can drill into it. But as you might be aware, Victoria had a few new cases of COVID. So when they had 5, they decided to lock down again, and this is the kind of pattern that we would see and anticipate. So about 2 weeks ago, on that Friday was the first day of lockdown, so you can see how that impacted. The weekend was extremely quiet, then remained quiet, and then on Thursday lifting some of those restrictions, and you can see the pattern coming back. You can also see the Camelback, sort of in further outlying stations here, Footscray, but then also the city centre obviously becoming busy in the evening, and you can see those patterns come through. So that's the operator's view. I just wanted to share also with you that I think somebody earlier spoke on how do you make it easy to use for your citizens and your customers. So the digitization of the MyKey card, as it was, onto the mobile phone, obviously means that roughly 4.5 million users or commuters make use of the actual app, but obviously there's visitors too that will not necessarily make use of the app. So this is also then pushed to Google Maps and an API, so that this is the web view of RideSpace specifically superimposed on the Google services. Obviously, interoperability there are key. So anybody who's worked in this is aware of the Google standards and how ubiquitously they're being used. And that allows then a particular commuter to plan their journey and see what a particular service might look like, what a railway station looks like, or a service that leaves that station, then accordingly to their own levels of comfort, either take a different route on the journey, be suggested a different route that's quieter, or a different time to make their journey depending on their preferences. And because I couldn't share the app with you, so this is what it would look like either on a mobile phone. Again, this is the Google superimposition, and then a view on the right-hand side there in terms of what it might look like at a particular station. And nice to have shots where things do get a little bit busier, and also good to see that mostly on time. So the outcome of this, I think, is both tangible and intangible. The pure commercial or financial side of it is that having this capability to showcase to citizens and commuters and allow them to plan their trips according to both lockdown levels and their level of comfort in terms of a pandemic context, at least, show that the services ran sort of very quickly back to capacity of what was allowable at the time. But on the trust level, having the capability to present and showcase the ability to manage your public transport infrastructure in a way that is safe for the citizens and takes their and allows them and empowers them to make their decisions accordingly, I think is an intangible capability or an outcome that is of great value to what we spoke in the context of our presentations here. So with that, I'm going to just look across here just to see if there are any questions or any comments that we can jump into.
There was an additional question we can answer now, so we have a couple of minutes time. How do you consider the interaction between cities? Is it danger if you just optimize only for one city? So the interaction between cities, so the data interoperability or joint forces between cities is important to do and to practice. Here in Germany, several bigger cities have joint smart city projects. I know it here from Munich and several bigger cities around Munich. The CDOs are working together on joint projects. So one of them is maybe the leading infrastructure provider. The other one, Munich, for example, is strong in application development and digitalization. Other cities and even not only in the local state, even outside the federation, cities are working together to bring up a joint solution. Even if they're working on an open source project or a validated integrated project. So our solutions are open, so there's no vendor lock in it. So at any time, cities can use a multi-cloud, going to a multi-cloud strategy, even when their services are allowed to host in a public cloud, we can do that. Because here in Germany we have cities that are only 1,000 citizens or smaller, and cities with we have 4 cities in Germany with over 1 million citizens. You see that there's a different level of smart city integrations or strategies. With smaller cities I'm talking with, they do not have a CDO or a digitalization officer, so they need support from us how they can participate in this journey, to show them who is in your environment around, to bring different kind of city administrations together with a local provider and data center provider, the EU government, to work together. So this is a joint journey of all.
Yeah, and I think what's very encouraging to see that cities themselves also recognize that. I mean, just the session like today or the Harvard accelerators, for instance, where specifically cities get together to exchange their experiences and how they go to work. But I think the partners that cities choose are also equally important in bringing experience from the various projects that they've done. And I can, just from an NTT perspective, the work that many of our companies in the group do with the EU specifically around data exchange, data standardization, indeed collaborating with the EU to prove that out, I think is a great accelerator for us to help our clients on that journey. I suppose from a technology up perspective in the main. We've got the breadth and the depth in the entire ICT solution. I think we've also gained the experience how to bring that to bear in terms of I'm going to say that the software aspects that we discussed, in terms of building trust, in terms of bringing the clients in, and maybe just a closing point on that. Increasingly, I think cities are investing with partners like ourselves and like yourselves into, and specifically in the European context, into innovation labs that are not for technology's sake, but specifically for the citizen participation to experience, to see, to feel, and to question, and to challenge. And I think that's a really powerful way of bringing that to fruition in I'm going to say a participative way. As opposed to, and I saw a comment, I think in the first session, even to say not to be prescriptive and force it down, but to grow it organically from the bottom up.
we need to know about the digitalization strategy of the whole city environment, even from the utilities to the transportation, mobility, and so on, public transportation. Because what I've seen and have in discussion that city utilities are more and more the center of the IT infrastructure, even for K-12 education. So they will host the education infrastructure for the schools within a city area, for example, not the school themselves or the administration, it's the utilities. So we need to talk to everyone to bring them together for the discussion. Hey, please do not go into a silo area again, since you have done it 30, 40 years in the past. Please think about a hyper-converged, centralized infrastructure with all the restrict and security regulations. Our solution is security conform for critical infrastructure too. So I'm looking forward for upcoming discussions. So for now, I think we've done, and now it's lunchtime. And Rebecca told me I have to inform you that it go on with a session 3 at 1:45, 1:45.
Okay, well, thank you. It was a pleasure speaking to you all, and bon appetit, guten appetit. Have a good meal, and we'll see you in the afternoon. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.